can't tell you the number of times I've wanted to record one of these and I've completely forgotten. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So as I said, oh, here we go. He just came back in. Hi, Mickey.
Hi, sorry, I had issues with the internet.
That's okay. We're glad you're here. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. I'm Dale. I don't think we've met before.
Hi, Dale. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody.
And
Hi.
where are you calling from, Mickey?
I'm in Germany.
Germany. Okay. Very good. And where in Germany?
hmm Munich.
Ah, my favorite. I love Munich.
Oh, you've been to Munich?
Yes, I have. I've been a couple of times. It's been a long time, but I've been to a few times to Munich, and it's one of my favorite cities in Europe. I love Munich. I had great times. Of course, I traveled out early also when I was very young, and so there was a lot of beer involved, and so maybe that was why.
Okay. I guess you've been to Oktoberfest as well, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. It was great. But no, I mean, I love Munich. I find the people there extremely friendly, and it's very much like Texas. Texas is to the U.S. as Munich is to Germany, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's
Wow,
my
nice.
observation anyway.
Nice. Well, Texas is a bit warmer, I think.
That yes, weather-wise, not a good comparison.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. It's getting better. We're having spring now. And yeah.
Okay, well, good. Well, thank you for being here. I did give a warning or a disclaimer that I may use portions of this video on social media.
Mhm.
I will not be monetizing it because I don't have any means to monetize social media, and I'm not a big social media person, but I may want to post this in the future, and I would not post any portion that involves any of you guys. It would just be the portions where I'm talking. So I just
Mhm.
want to make sure you're comfortable with that.
Yes.
Okay. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I was telling the group that this is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about my illness. And it's something that I have intended to do for a while, but have never not. So I apologize in advance if this gets awkward or if I get emotional or whatever it is. I have no idea what's going to happen because I've never really talked about it in an open and to an audience. So the point of the call is to this started on one of the lab calls with Johanna a couple of weeks ago. Somebody had in the chat had written something about an autoimmune disease, and somebody else said, "Hey, I've healed myself from an autoimmune disease, and we should have a call." And then I jumped in and said, "Oh, hey, I'd like to be part of that call." And then no one ever started the call, so I waited several minutes and said, "Okay, I'll do the call." So here we are, and I think the objective is just to share knowledge and share information about healing from autoimmune. So I personally have I healed myself from an autoimmune disease. There are other people in our group who have also. There's one other gentleman in our group by the name of Sanjay Parmer. He's in Toronto. You might know him. He's in our group, and Sanjay cured himself from MS. So he will be on a future call speaking about his experience. And there's probably at least one other person that I'm hoping will be able to join and talk about her experience. And so the format of the call will just be so on this first call, in my case, I'll share my experience. I'll tell you the steps that I took to get my disease under control. And then we'll just have open discussion. Does that make sense for
Thank you
everyone?
so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I know Sanjay. I know about that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for being here, for being willing to listen. It's I guess if I think about why I have an interest in sharing the story, I think it's really just to give people some hope, because I know how hopeless it can be when you're in the illness or when you have a family member that is in the illness, and it's very dark and it's very difficult to be positive because, like in my case, and I'm sure in the case of other people, all the doctors tell you there's no cure. Turns out that's not true, but in the moment you don't know that, and so it can be a very dark place. And if I can help people have a little bit of hope, or if I could share some of the actual things that I did that in my case that actually made me better, then I think that would be helpful too. So that's really my objective, is just share the information, because unfortunately the conventional Western medicine, or at least the Western medicine model that we have here in the United States, which I think probably exists in most countries, just is not prepared. It's just not informed enough, and is not really sort of progressive in its thinking enough to see that there are other ways of healing from illness that don't involve a pill, or a surgery. And I learned that personally, and so I'm pretty passionate about sharing that. So I'll tell you the story. I actually have two autoimmune conditions. The first one, I'm going to share my screen here. The first one I was diagnosed with a long time ago, probably 10 or more years ago. Well, first of all, actually, let me ask, does everybody know, everybody has a definition of autoimmune disease, right? If there's anybody who does not know what autoimmune means, just raise your hand or put something in the chat, and I'll go through this definition real quick. But I'm assuming everybody knows what autoimmune means, right? Okay, so I'll skip that part. The first diagnosis I had was this condition called ITP, which I think is kind of funny. I just now discovered this when I looked it up today. But when I was diagnosed, it says formally here. At the time I was diagnosed, it was called idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, which is a ridiculous name. And the reason, this is just kind of funny. It's almost like a joke that I'm telling you this, but that first word, I always wonder what that first word means. What that first word means is actually they have no idea what the hell it is. That's literally the meaning of the word. If you look up the word idiopathic, it means relating to or designating a disease having no known cause. So I thought it was pretty ridiculous that they don't even know what the hell it is, but they gave it a name, and the name is, we don't know what the hell this is. So that's what it was called at the time. Now, apparently, they have renamed it immune thrombocytopenia, which makes a little bit more sense because it is an autoimmune condition. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because it's kind of an important detail in the story, is at the time I was diagnosed with this, they did not tell me that it was an autoimmune condition. And I think had they told me that, I might have had some different outcomes, but they probably didn't know it themselves, and they didn't tell me that it was an autoimmune condition. What that means is, as you know, the body eats its own tissues. And in this case, it's a problem with the blood platelets. So this was discovered in me during a regular checkup when they did my blood work, and my platelets came in very low. And so at first they just wanted to monitor it. And we did so, and got the test again like 6 months later, and the platelets were still low. Finally, they decided to do it's basically, I forget what it's called, a spinal tap. And they did that to extract tissue from my spine to diagnose the thing, and they diagnosed it as this thing called ITP. But I never had any symptoms other than occasionally I would have some unexplained bruises randomly on my body, even though there had been no injury. It's not like I hit myself, they're just random bruises would show up, and that's one of the symptoms. But it never really caused a problem, so I ignored it for years and years and years. They never proposed any kind of a medication. So fast forward, this was in January of 2016, I was sitting in a restaurant having lunch, and I was eating, and all of a sudden I felt this odd thing inside my mouth, sort of along my teeth, like on my gums, and I could feel it with my tongue, and it was very odd. It's like a tiny pea, and I thought maybe it was a piece of food or something had gotten stuck. So I went to the bathroom, and there was this blood blister inside my mouth. And so I was concerned, but then I didn't really know what to do about it, so I kind of ignored it. And then a few minutes later, it burst, and so it was no longer, a pea. It was just like a flat piece of skin. And then within a couple hours, it had healed. So I ignored it. And then fast forward, it started happening again. And so finally, I was getting like multiple of these blisters, and they would come and they would go very quickly. So finally, I decided when they would come and they wouldn't heal as quickly, so it was like lasting a couple of days. So I went to the doctor. I actually went to the dentist because it's inside my mouth. I don't know what to do, so I go to the dentist. They do a biopsy, and they come back and they tell me I have a disease called Pemphigus vulgaris, which I had never heard of. And I was like, what the hell is Pemphigus vulgaris? And so let's go look at that real quick. So Pemphigus vulgaris is the most common form of pemphigus, which is a skin condition, causes blisters, can make eating difficult. There's no cure. Okay, I'm highlighting this for a reason. They say there's no cure. There's another website. This website here is the Cleveland Clinic. There's another website. This is the American Academy of Dermatology. They also say here, I don't want you guys to see this, somewhere here they say there's no cure. Where was that? So anyway, so somewhere in here it says that there's no cure, which I disagree with, which is the whole reason we're having this call. So anyway, they diagnosed me with Pemphigus vulgaris, okay? And they tell me that there's no cure, and they tell me that the only way to control it is to be on drugs for the rest of my life. So at the time, it wasn't very bad. I kind of ignored it. I was depressed about it. I was in disbelief. I went through all those stages, finally, when the blisters kept coming and they wouldn't heal very quickly, I went back again. I said, I don't believe what you told me. Let's do another test. So they did a different type of test. They came back, same diagnosis. This is Pemphigus vulgaris. And at this point, they're like, the only thing we can do for you is to give you a topical steroid. Now so at this time, all the blisters are in my mouth. So think about that. Putting a topical steroid inside your mouth doesn't seem like it would work very well, right? And so I had a really hard time with this. It didn't work. Because it's very difficult to put because it doesn't stay, right? You put a topical ointment inside your mouth, it's not going to stay very well. And I would tell them that, and they would say, well, try putting a piece of gauze, and they gave me all this ridiculous advice to try to put those steroids in my mouth, and it didn't work. So it started getting progressively worse and worse and worse. So fast forward to Memorial Day of 2017. By Memorial Day of 2017, so this is like a little more than a year after I was originally diagnosed, it was getting really bad. It was so bad that I had to chew my food on one side of my mouth because there were so many blisters. And it was excruciatingly painful to touch those blisters. And so I had to eat on one side of my mouth. At that point, so my wife kind of stepped in. She had just become a functional medicine health coach at the time. So she's like, naturopath, holistic medicine. We started several different regimens on the holistic side to try to get this thing under control. Nothing worked. And what I figured out after the fact is that, I think there's a certain point in the progress of a disease that the natural remedies are going to be ineffective or much less effective. And I learned this after the fact. But even though we were doing all these things, I was doing intravenous glutathione. I was doing all these things to boost my immune system. I completely changed my diet. I removed gluten, sugar, and dairy from my diet. I removed alcohol from my diet. So we were doing these things that you would think would be the right things to do, but I think the disease had progressed too far by that point. So then by the time June, July came around, I was completely unable to eat. I was having a hard time drinking water because the blisters had gotten so bad. The entirety of my mouth was covered. My lips were covered. My throat. I even turned out I had a blister on my epiglottis, which is the flap that covers up your trachea. So when you breathe, the epiglottis is a little flap that opens up to let the air in. I had blisters on my epiglottis. So I couldn't eat. And I ended up losing a third of my body weight. So I'm 6 feet tall. And at the time I was about 200, 205 pounds. By the time I checked into the hospital, I was 135. My friends who came to see me would be like, they told me this after the fact. They didn't tell me this in the moment, but after the fact, everyone was like, yeah, you pretty much looked like a dead man. Like you looked like a skeleton because I couldn't eat. And it was just weird how your mind plays tricks on you. You get to the point where even though you have to eat, the body needs food. It was associated with so much pain that I never felt hunger. So I was never hungry because I was afraid to eat. This is what the mind can do to you. And I was down to 135 pounds. So finally I checked into the hospital, and that's when they, shoved me full of steroids and other drugs to get me back to shape. So one thing I want to throw out, and this is probably common in a lot of autoimmune diseases, I also had gotten my levels checked for a virus called EBV, which is Epstein-Barr virus. And this is a very common virus that almost everybody has. We get it from a very common childhood sickness. I think it's either mononucleosis. It's one of those common viruses that we get when we're kids, very common in the United States. Something like 75% of the population has this EBV virus inside our bodies. And what I think a lot of scientists and doctors don't know is that the EBV virus tends to, when it's dormant, it actually never leaves the body. When it is dormant, it can hide out in your organs or in your blood. It basically hides so that it's not detected by any kind of a blood test. Well, one of the naturopaths that I was seeing had said, let's check your EBV levels. And when they checked my EBV, when my symptoms were really bad, my EBV level was completely through the roof. Like the normal level of it is something like 10. I forget the how it's measured, but it was like 10. My level was 3,500 was the level of my EBV virus. When I checked into the hospital, when things were really bad, like I said, I couldn't eat, I couldn't even speak. I had to write stuff down to my wife on a pad because I couldn't talk. We told them, my wife said, hey, his EBV, can we do something about the EBV? Is there any connection? And they basically kind of looked at us like we were ridiculous and just blew us off. I mean, they gave us the courtesy of hearing what we had to say, but they're like, no, that has nothing to do with it. You're crazy. Why are we even talking about this? So they had no interest in investigating the levels of virus that were in my body and how that might have been connected to the symptoms. So anyway, that's an important piece of information because I think a lot of people with autoimmune probably should look at their EBV levels and see if something can be done about that. So I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and when I got out, they got the blisters under control. The blisters started to go down. At this point, they had spread all over my body. So basically, my whole body was covered in this stuff. And this inflammation came significantly down. They were giving me extremely high levels of prednisone and a whole bunch of other steroids and antibiotics. Now, hold on to that thought about prednisone for a second, because that's going to be another part of the story later on. So at the time, I was able to eat again, but I was on a liquid diet, so I could only consume liquids for a long time. So it took about 6 weeks before I could start eating solid foods again. Shortly after I got out of the hospital, I went to go see a functional medicine doctor. It's EBV, by the way, Epstein-Barr virus. B is in bar, B-A-R-R, and virus. Carl. So I went to go see a doctor who is not an MD. He's a DO, which is a different kind of medical degree. But he is a fully licensed physician, but he is a functional medicine doctor who has a very open approach around holistic medicine. And they took one look at me and they said, first of all, we're going to get you off the steroids as soon as possible. We can't believe the doctors ignored the Epstein-Barr virus. They did a whole bunch of tests that none of the doctors because I was in the emergency room and then I was in the regular hospital, no one had ever mentioned some of these tests. One thing they did was they took a sample of my blood and they put it under a microscope right there when I was sitting right next to it. So I was in a laboratory inside the doctor's office, and they took my blood, put it under a microscope, and they saw a bunch of Candida fungus. So Candida is a fungus that's commonly found inside the blood. And it is basically, for most people, I believe it's a result of bad diet, especially if you have a lot of sugar. So, viruses and funguses love sugar, which is why they tell you you shouldn't eat sugary foods when you have a cold or when you have the flu, because that you're basically just feeding the virus. And this is also true for cancer. Like there's a lot of, and now I think it's becoming more in the mainstream, is that cancerous cells love to consume sugar. So there's a fungus that can occur in your blood, and it's called Candida. And they found a shit ton of Candida in my blood in this alternative medicine doctor's office. They also tested me for heavy metals. And this is a urine test that you can have done. And over a 24-hour period, you urinate into a giant jug. And so they take a very large sample of your urine, they analyze it, and they are searching for various heavy metals. It turns out I had near toxic levels of 2 specific heavy metals in my body that I couldn't name right. If you're interested, hit me up later and I can go look them up for you. I don't remember the names of these 2 heavy metals. The best we could figure out was that I had gotten these heavy metals in my system from drinking the liquids that they give you when you do an X-ray or an MRI. I shouldn't say 2. One of them was very commonly found in that stuff they make you drink when you do like a CAT scan or an MRI. So my belief is that that's how I got. So some people have a genetic, and it may not be genetic, but it may be other causes that your body is unable to detoxify the metals that you ingest when they give you that liquid, right? So the doctors know that it's there and they expect that your body will be able to detoxify it. Well, that's not always true. Your body may not be, for one reason or another, be able to detoxify that heavy metal. And if it remains in your body for a period of time, it's going to cause illness. So here we are. I've got EBV virus. I've got candida. I've got heavy metals, things that I never knew were inside my body. And in my mind, no question, had something to do with my illness. So what did we do about it? So we started, at this time, I was still taking the steroids. So I got out of the hospital in August of 2017. I continued the high dose. So I did all the things that the new doctor told me to do. But I also was still having the blisters. And so my belief was, and the doctor agreed with this, for the meantime, continue taking the steroids until we can get the inflammation under control. And then the other things will start to take effect. So I continued taking the steroids, very high dose, by the way. At one point, I was like over 100 milligrams per dose of prednisone, which is like a horse load. That's like a lot of prednisone. But that's how bad the blisters were. So in the meantime, they put me on various IV treatments to try to reduce the detoxification. So the big thing was detoxify all the poisonous shit that's in your body, right? Try to get the Epstein-Barr virus levels down and try to get the candida down, which meant very restrictive diet, which meant doing IVs that included, I did glutathione IVs, I did ozonation, when they ozonate your blood. I did hydrogen peroxide IVs. I did multivitamin IVs. There was a whole host of IVs that I was doing. I also did chelation. So chelation is CHELATION. This is an IV treatment that they give you to remove metals from your body. Now, there's a lot of controversy around chelation because some people believe that it's too strong and not every body is healthy enough to withstand, because it's a very strong treatment. But I did chelation, and what it does is they put a substance inside your body. It binds to the heavy metals, and then you can pass it through, right? So it's a way of cleaning the heavy metals out of your system. So I was doing all of these things. I slowly started to gain my weight back. And then fast forward about 7 months. So now it's March of 2018. And my family and I were driving down to Austin. I live in Dallas, so it's about a 4 hour drive south for our spring break. We're going to go to the countryside and do some hiking. And so I was driving the car and I'm looking at the road signs and I start to notice that they're very blurry. And at first I thought, well, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe my eyes are dry. So I put some eye drops in. It got a little bit better, but then it didn't. The next day, same thing. Turns out that cataracts are an extremely common side effect of prednisone, which, by the way, they never told me. So doctors never told me that I could potentially get cataracts in my eyes as a side effect of the freaking steroids, and especially at the doses that I was taking the steroids, right? So now I've got cataracts in my eyes, and I had to have surgery to remove the cataracts. And as a result of that surgery, my up close vision is permanently disabled. So I have to wear reading glasses to read, thanks to the so the cataracts are gone. So that's a good thing. So basically, it turns out to be a trade-off. Would you rather have eyeglasses to see up close, or would you rather have cataracts? And so, I ended up choosing to get rid of the cataracts. And so now I have that reminder every time I have to put on my eyeglasses to read. So that's really kind of the full story. Eventually, I realized that, and I guess this is kind of an important part of the story. This is the part where things get better. So once I got the cataracts, I immediately stopped taking the steroids. And at that point, I was already kind of drawing them down. So I was probably only taking between 25 and 30 milligrams at this point in time. So it was already on the way out. The blisters were under control. Things were a lot better. But when I got the cataracts, I just basically cut off the steroids cold turkey. I said, I'm not doing this anymore for obvious reasons. Over the next several months, what I started to realize, and this is kind of this is the moral of the story. I started to realize as the blisters got more and more under control and started to heal, I would get occasionally a new blister, but it wouldn't last very long. So it was nowhere like it was before. And then I realized there was a correlation. I realized that when I have a stressful event, I would get a blister. And this became a pattern that was 100%, almost 100%. Anything stressful that happened, I would get a blister. And I would notice it. The most obvious one was if I got into a fight with my wife. If my wife and I got into a fight about something, it would literally be 10 seconds and I would feel it with my tongue, the blister inside my mouth. And I would go look in the mirror and there was a blister in my mouth. So this became a regular pattern. And I started to connect everything in my mind, how this was happening. Then several months later, I also noticed the opposite was also true. In the absence of stress, there were no blisters. And I noticed this after I went for a period of several months, maybe it was 2 months, of no new blisters. And I thought about, like, what am I doing differently? You know, have I changed my diet? Has something, the only thing that was different was there was no stressful events in my life. And so there was no blisters. So I thought back to when I first got sick. When I got sick, I was in a very stressful job. I had joined a company recently that was basically spiraling towards bankruptcy. And I had a couple of months prior to everything getting really bad, my company forced me to lay off all of my employees. So I had to lay off 50 people from the company. I knew that my own job was in danger. I knew that they had hired me to help fix their finances. And once I got there, after I did all my research and studying, trying to figure out what was going on with the company, I realized there was no way the company was going to recover, that the bankruptcy was inevitable. And I was having a very difficult time persuading the top management that drastic action needed to be taken. They didn't want to hear the story. So I didn't realize how much stress this was putting on me, but now I can make the connection. So the reason that I got so sick was because of that stress. So the healing part of the story. So now I want to share the healing part of the story. This is the good news part of it. It wasn't. So I'm sorry, I did a little slide for you guys to kind of summarize the main points. So to summarize the whole thing, I think it comes down to 3 things that I did to keep my autoimmune in check. And by the way, I forgot to mention one thing about a drug. That there was another drug they wanted me to take called rituximab. I missed this part of the story, but when I was in the hospital, I came out, the Western doctors told me I needed to take this drug called rituximab. And it was in addition to the steroids, it is a cancer drug that they were experimentally using for my condition and having good results. And so it was, I'd have to go in for an infusion, take several hours to do. It's basically a chemotherapy drug. So it takes several hours to do the infusion. I was supposed to do it every 6 months for the rest of my life. And oh, by the way, each time you do it, it costs $24,000. Yeah. Fortunately, my insurance at the time covered it. But in that period of time, when I was kind of in between the Western treatments and the alternative treatments, I decided to go forward with it. So I ended up doing it 3 times over a 2-year period. And this is another thing too. So right when COVID happened, I was due for another rituximab treatment. And it had been a year, so I'd skipped the one prior and I wasn't having any symptoms. And this whole COVID thing happened, and they were talking about how I knew that this drug basically disables a part of your immune system. So I called my doctor and I was like, with this whole COVID thing, do you really think it's a good idea for me to take a drug that's going to suppress my immune system, even though I haven't been having any symptoms? And he agreed. So I didn't take that last dose of rituximab, and I'm really glad that I didn't, because fast forward to today, that drug, rituximab, is on the list of like the 20 most dangerous drugs approved by the FDA. Of course, you didn't know that at the time, right? But the reason I remembered to tell you that is, so here I am, that was COVID time. And I had quit all of the steroids in 2018. My last rituximab treatment was in 2019, a year before COVID. So since March of 2019, I have been completely drug-free. Remember, I'm supposed to take drugs for the rest of my life, or otherwise it's not going to get cured. I've been drug-free totally, and I've had almost 0 outbreaks of the disease. So this whole thing about there's no cure to the autoimmune is bullshit, because there is. I am living proof of that. So I want to go over kind of, for me, the 3 big things that I did. And I've talked to other people who have gotten their autoimmune under control, and it's different for everybody, right? So when Sajay comes and tells you his story, his things are different, but these are my big 3 things. So the first one, why is my PowerPoint not working? There we go. Stress management, okay? There were 3 things I did for stress management. So the first one is called brainwave entrainment, and I talked about this at the beginning of the call. So one of the modalities that my wife works in is sound healing. So using sound to heal the body. And there is a technology that she's licensed from her mentor, this doctor that invented this software that creates what are called binaural beats. Binaural beats can be used to train the brain to a different brain speed, a different brain state. So when we're stressed out, our brain is operating at a pretty high frequency, somewhere between like 15 and 30 hertz, which means cycles per second. And that is generally a fight or flight response. So when we're in a stressful situation, even though we may not realize it, what's happening inside our body is that our body is in a fight or flight condition, which means that it is suppressing the less important functions of the body, like digestion. And so when you're in a stress state, your digestion isn't working like the way it's supposed to. Your lymphatic system is not working the way it's supposed to. And so, if you're in this state over a long period of time, it's going to be detrimental to the body. What we can do with the sound waves, with the sound files, is you apply frequencies through sound to the brain, and the brain will follow that frequency. And so you can literally slow your brain down using a specific frequency. And so this is one of the things I did. So at least 5 times a week for 30 minutes a day, I was listening to a stress relief sound file that was helping my brain to calm down. It was helping suppress that fight or flight response inside my body. I attribute a big part of my stress reduction to that. The other big thing too is just basic mindset, right? So it's the reason that we're all here as life coaches. I did several programs. I basically changed myself in a lot of ways. I had a lot of anger issues kind of in general, easily frustrated, easily irritated, expressing my anger to my kids, to my wife. And so I did a lot of really hard work to get that under control, because that is effectively stress, and it's creating hormonal reactions inside the body that are just not serving. I did a lot of work on that, and I will tell you what my kids will tell you, and maybe they didn't notice it as much, but because it wasn't like I was a complete, I wasn't like an irrational a-hole or anything like that. But I mean, I am so much better than I was like 3 years ago, just from having a stronger mindset. And I know that had a big part in, making me better, or suppressing the autoimmune symptoms. I quit my job too, so that was the other thing. And it turned out that in December of that year, so I was out of the hospital like 3 months, my mom passed away, and my father-in-law had passed away while I was in the hospital. There was all this shit that happened at the same time, and quitting the job was a big part of, keeping my stress down. So that was the stress part. Detox. So I mentioned this, right? There were several things that I did to detoxify my body. And what I understand about illness now is that stress is my belief. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor. My belief is that stress is a big part of almost any illness. And all the toxins that are in our bodies are a big part of any illness. And we're getting toxins constantly. So we have shit in our water that we drink. We have shit in the air that we breathe. There's shit in the food that we eat. You know, there's pesticides and chemicals and hormones and antibiotics and all the meat and in the food. There's just a ton of crap. And apparently for me, when I go get the X-ray, I drink that fluid and my body can't process it out. So now I have heavy metals in my body, right? So your immune system can only take so much. Over time, eventually, your immune system is going to get worn down from trying to process and detoxify all the shit out of your body. It can only take so much. For me, I got to the point that is called toxic overload. So I was toxic overload. My body couldn't get the toxins out, so I got sick. So there were several things that I did. I mentioned the chelation, other IV treatments. I was doing lymphatic massage. I was doing colon hydrotherapy. For those of you that don't know what colon hydrotherapy is, basically is they fill your colon with water and clean it out. So we have, you know, when we go to the bathroom and have a bowel movement, for most people, you're not completely cleaning out your colon, especially if you don't have a very good diet. So this is a treatment that helps you keep the colon clean. Lymphatic massage is where, you know, they massage the lymph nodes to help the lymph nodes drain. And then I had several supplements and other things that I was doing to help detoxify them. But that was those two things, managing the stress and detoxifying, were for me, in my mind, the two key things. And then diet. So I did clean up my diet, and I've gone kind of up and down. For the first year, like I said, in Memorial Day, before I got really sick, is when I really cleaned up the diet, and I kept that diet for probably a year to a year and a half after. And basically it's no gluten, no sugar, no dairy. Because so for me and for most people, I believe gluten and sugar and dairy are inflammatory foods. And autoimmune disease is all about being in a state of inflammation. So by eating those foods, you're basically just exacerbating the inflammation, and you're making it much harder for your immune system to function properly. So cleaning up the diet was a big part. And that's the story. I'm sorry that took so long, but I hope there was some useful information in there. Be happy to take any questions, or if you guys want to just have open discussion.
Thank you for sharing, Dale. I think it needed to have those details, so it, you know, I think they're all important details to really outline and understand what you went through, you know, and what it took.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I wanted to give some good detail because a lot of what I said, I think, will be familiar to people who are going through an autoimmune. And if not, then there are things to look into, you know, especially like the Epstein-Barr virus, I think is a big one. You know, understanding the negative consequences of the steroids. I know a lot of people are on steroids for all kinds of different reasons. They give steroids to small children, you know, and steroids, I think, are very useful for a specific purpose at a specific moment in time. But I think over the long term, they're extremely dangerous. And a lot of people don't know that. So I feel like that's an important detail to share.
So Dale, I have a question.
Sure.
So once you were out of steroids, did this pattern or did this thing kept recurring again? Like, did it repeat it again?
Yeah, they did for a while. It was never as bad as it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the first time around, but they did persist for a while.
Mm-hmm. So how did you overcome it?
So I basically, I wouldn't do anything. I just ignored it. So it would, the blister would appear. Usually when there was it was usually in response to a stressful occurrence. And then sometimes within a couple of hours, it would heal. And sometimes it would take, you know, 3 or 4 days to go away. So they did persist for a while, but it was definitely declining over time. The last time I had a blister, and when it did happen, like that first year, it would be like 2, 3, 4 blisters at a time. And then it would be like 2 blisters, and then it would be like an occasional 1 blister. And now it's probably been a year since I've had any at all. Okay. So it took a while, but.
So I go through I'm having psoriasis, and I go through a similar pattern, and the blisters keep coming up again and again. I mean, there's no pattern or anything to it, but I tried a lot of different things, like the way you said, the brainwave, music, the cleansing of the chakras, then healing internally. I tried a lot of other things. Initially, when it started, it actually started in the COVID days, and that time I didn't have an option to go and visit a dermatologist, and it started with the small rashes all over my body, uh, and it started with, like, small things, but due to the COVID days, due to the COVID time, I couldn't visit Dabra, and then it became really worst over, like, period of 6-7 months. And finally, when I went to dermatologist, I was on she put me on steroids because that was the only way where you could control those blisters.
Yep.
Though those were all external blisters, but they were really worse. They were, like, really as if like my skin is burned due to some sunburn or something like that. And yeah, but still, it's been 3-4 years now, 3-4 years. It's still, there are some triggers wherein it again comes back.
Do you know what the triggers are?
Uh, Actually, when I started working on it on internally, it was due to, like, a lot of anger that has been bottled up inside me. That causes the triggers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? How, and I don't mean that in a
Yeah.
good way. I mean, I think it's just amazing that the doctors don't tell you that.
Yeah.
The doctors don't tell you that.
So initially, like, since it was COVID days and I couldn't visit the dermatologist, I just tried all the natural ways, and, like, I started taking homeopathic medicines, but it really didn't work for me at that time, and I had to go to the dermatologist over the period of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and so my learning of it is I was always kind of generally skeptical of the Western medicine model,
Yeah.
but now I'm beyond skeptical, but I do recognize there's some value to it. It's just like for me, like I can't bad talk the steroids that much because the truth is that the steroids saved my life.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah. I
surely
mean,
have died. Yeah.
even for me, it's like, if I don't, if I have to control, and if it should not multiply, I have to take the steroids. It's that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, I've reduced the dose of steroids. And the only problem over here, while in India, it was like easily available. They would just give me over the counter with the prescription. But here, they just don't give me any steroids out over here.
Yeah. Have you considered the detox possibility? Have you been tested for heavy metals or anything like that?
No, no. So nowadays over here, I have started with the light therapy. That's
Yeah.
what they say. That's, like, kind of helps uh, not spreading it more.
Yeah, I would look into that. So the heavy metals also, I would look at Candida,
Okay.
which is a simple, like I said, they just prick your finger, they take a drop of
Okay.
blood. Yeah, and it's amazing. They can actually show it to you, so you can actually. For me,
Okay.
they put the microscope on a screen, and you could physically see the tiny little cells
So,
of Candida.
will you need a prescription to do that test?
Nope, nope.
No?
You just got to find a doctor that does it.
Oh, okay.
It's that simple. Yeah, and they
Okay.
and it's very illuminating because they will look for other things also inside your blood. So they're whoever thought of the idea of the doctor actually putting your blood under the microscope?
Yeah.
Seems like a very obvious thing, but I'd never had heard of such a thing, right? Until I went to this guy and he did that and he found, yeah, you've got Candida. Like, no wonder you're sick. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Dale, is that typically Eastern medicine that will run those kind of tests?
No, I don't think so. It might be, but I think it's probably more of a naturopath thing.
Okay.
That one, and also checking for heavy metals is
Okay.
one that is more of a naturopath thing. And I say that because I remember when I went back to my regular dermatologist, the Western dermatologist, because I was back and forth between him and the holistic guy. And I mentioned the heavy metals to the regular dermatologist, and he was like, huh? We never test for that. Yeah.
Maybe you should.
Maybe you should. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Anything else? Anybody else?
Thank you so much for sharing all this, Dale. I can totally relate to all that you said, because I've been on a recovery journey for more than a decade now, and as you said, it kind of starts with one, but then if you don't get into that recovery mode, as quick as you can, it kind of develops into more than one.
Right.
So I'm kind of in that mode now, but yeah, I've recovered also. I'm recovering now, so I'm on that recovery journey. I can totally relate to the challenges that you went through, the steroids, getting admitted in hospital for, like uh, I've had multiple visits, emergency visits, and and it makes me think that there could be more of those autoimmune conditions that are not diagnosed still.
Yeah.
And I've come to a point where I don't care. I'm just going to work on the healing journey. It doesn't really matter what the doctors say. And it's not an easy thing to talk about it. So I really, my heart goes with you and for you. So it's a challenging thing to do. And what has been
Thank you,
helping
man.
me is um, the colon cleansing. I understand the importance of that. That is something that we really need to take it seriously. It's the importance of keeping your colon clean, otherwise it gets deposited, and it kind of comes up as different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the naturopaths. I've visited a number of functional doctors, and a lot of integrative GPs, and it has been a very long journey for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, likewise, my heart goes out to you. And I hope that you find the healing, and hopefully there were some nuggets in here that you could apply.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, go ahead.
To Sujata, I was just thinking, the diet part that Dale mentioned is something that you might
Yeah,
have to consider seriously.
Geeta, yeah, I have done that changes to my diet. Like I make sure I eat a lot of fibers and a lot of greens, so that all the toxins which have been accumulated flushes away. Other than that, there was also an issue like in between when we did that allergy test of some they test for almost like uh, 12,000 or 18,000 things to which you're allergic to. So they found that dust could be one of the thing to which it might be getting triggered or something. So we were not very sure. So we thought probably in India there's a lot of dust and a lot of particles. So when we moved here, it could be better. But yeah, sometimes definitely, especially when there is a weather change, it still triggers.
But then, did you consider going off gluten, dairy, and sugar, because those are definitely inflammatory foods that
Yeah,
you
I
need
have
to.
reduced. I have reduced my carbs. I mean, I'm not completely off it, but I've just reduced my intake with that.
I
For me,
would
that
go
was a big
completely off.
turning point. Yeah, that was a big turning point for me, going
So,
off completely.
Oh,
And then
okay.
once you recover, once you know that you're okay, then you can maybe
Yeah, I
occasionally
mean,
have a
so
little bit
when
cheat
it
days.
really triggers and all, I go completely off. And but yeah, but in a way, like I'm not completely off. Like not on everyday basis.
Mhm.
I eat, but to a very minimal amount. No, I mean not that I'm very hard at first. That I'm gluten. I eat gluten-free things. So
yeah, my experience is that like these things, they stay, like dairy can stay or gluten can stay for like months in your system. So you might eat a little bit now,
Mhm.
but it will still feed for long after, because it goes somewhere and it has to get processed now. And it's very difficult, from my understanding, to get rid of that part that you just put into your body. It just doesn't come
Yeah,
in.
and one more thing to it was like, you have been eating since your childhood, and all of the sudden you have developed allergies to those things, especially like things like cinnamon and all. So, uh, and initially it started when it was like COVID days. You were having a lot of immunity booster drinks and all, and we used to include a lot of cinnamon and all in it. And I didn't realize till the point that, like, I was allergic to cinnamon. So
That, when people have allergies to certain foods, especially, well, now I think about it, there's very different types of cinnamon, and some are better than others. Like some are very powerful medicinal, and some are just not as good,
yeah.
So maybe you shouldn't do the not good cinnamon. But when people develop an irritation towards something that is actually healing, there's so many questions that come up in my mind. Are you having a reaction because the healing is happening, and there's an irritation because an irritation had already been made? Like say you have an irritation in your bowels, and it's because it's scraping against it, or that is the actual allergy, but it's not actually what you are allergic to. You're just having a healing phase, and it's going to, right now in this moment in time, it's going to kind of be uncomfortable, so I kind of wonder what allergy means to a person when they're experiencing things that are actually healing type of substances. But for me, if I were to really think about the goal, and the goal is to be 100% clear of all my symptoms. And my symptoms at the moment is like fatigue, mouth sores, rashes, and minor infections that would come up, like UTIs or whatever, all of these things that would be more frequent if I didn't pay attention to my system. I want to get rid of all of it. Like, so every day of my life is going to be filled without that fear of activating that infection. It's going to take a commitment to get rid of all of the things that feed those viruses, and it might take a little bit of time, it's because I'll just say this, if you are 30 or 40 years old, right, you've got 30 or 40 years of stuff stuck in your system, and maybe 1 month of not eating those, is not going to cut it. Like, you might have to dedicate like a year or two, in fact, maybe 3, till for sure that you can sustain this, for a long period of time. That's all I wanted to just kind of emphasize, because I know healing is slower, this natural way. And but I feel like long term it is really beneficial, and we just don't have that patience sometimes. You want to just heal now, with a pill.
Oh yeah, no, like I said initially, I tried all the natural ways to heal, and I didn't take any medicine, no allopathic medicine at all. And but it really worsened the situation, and I don't know if the time was not right or something, or I was doing something wrong. So it really got worse. So finally I had to go and take some steroids, and that could get the situation under control. But after that, I didn't have like major triggers, but once in a while it does. I'm still trying to work on those triggers, not to get those triggers activated. And
I saw a really huge progress, and this is to affirm what Dale had noted, when I did the heavy metal detox smoothie, and it's quite simple. It has 6 or 7 ingredients, from my understanding, works in synergy together as it picks up metals that are deep within different parts of our body. It picks it up and carries it to the place where the next ingredient could also carry it
Oh, okay.
and pick it up, and then the next ingredient. So it just kind of moves it completely out of the system, and not just so it kind of like gets stuck somewhere, you know.
Okay.
And I would like to recommend that for people if they're interested. It's easy to make. The ingredients
like
are simple.
if you would share, it would be. I mean, I'm learning something about this for the first time, so I would like to know more about it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can try different things like, you know, chelation. Yeah, there's that controversy. If you want something gentler or whatever, without having to go through that process, yeah, you could try this instead and see how you feel after a few, you know, weeks or so. And there are gentler alternatives. Like if you don't want to go through the hydrocolon.
Hydrotherapy.
Hydrotherapy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do that.
hydrotherapy.
Do that
Yeah,
once in a while.
yeah,
Mhm.
you know, so I feel like introducing lemon water into your routine, and then also
Mhm.
juicing also does the same thing. It pushes out your
I do the detox water with
okay,
the
yeah.
lemon infused waters basically nowadays.
Yeah, so
Mm.
I think you are taking steps to you know, for
Yeah,
it.
but it's just like,
The
it's
extra
just the time, and it's like more than 3 years, 4 years now, and you really want to get rid of it. I'm
yeah.
even trying the Marissa Peers. She tells you to direct that thought to the disease and try to get out. There is a therapy on it, and you have to just like, uh, direct your brain to get rid of that disease. So you have to just
Yeah.
keep telling your mind that you're
Yeah.
getting rid of it. You're getting rid of it. I'm
Yeah,
also
and
working on that as well.
I mean, like if it's a underlying viral infection, you have to do antiviral. And you know, that I think that's the biggest like takeaway from this whole conversation, is that everything that you put in should be antiviral instead of
Yeah.
feeding viral. And
Yeah.
there's a story I want to share. There's an Australian Olympic swimming team that figured it out, you know, why they weren't getting gold medals, and it's by like 0.8 of a second or something. Like it's an article I read. I'm just sharing information.
Okay.
But they figured out that they noticed that when their swimmers were training, they overtrained so much that maybe they depleted some of their immune system, and they would get these mouth sores. And then they're like, that mouth sore during the competition affected their medal take by 0.8 seconds or whatever. So when they started looking into these things that would happen on their immune system level, they found out that there was a indication of EBV virus as well during in these swimmers. And then so they conditioned their swimmers to do a different type of routine so it's less stressful on their bodies, and it actually promotes Epstein-Barr virus, perfect, so that they can have healing while they're training, and they're not depleting their immune system as they're training too hard. That's one. And then two, they gave all of those athletes antiviral type of medications, like, you know, everybody's giving a hard time about ivermectin, and there's another antiviral medication that was out there that everybody was poo-pooing on during the COVID. But you know, those are very powerful, you know, things that people put into their system to get rid of some of these you know, viral growths, you know. So I mean, there, you can do that naturally too. There's a whole list of antiviral things, like olive leaf, very antiviral, you know. So if we can maybe share some of the, you know, like Dale, I don't know, can we make a comprehensive list?
Yeah, that would be helpful actually.
Yeah. One of the things to also consider, and I had forgotten about this one, there were so many things that I went through, but there is a genetic defect that affects something like half of the population. And some of you guys may know about this one. Let me share my screen. I think it's called MTHFR. as
Yeah,
mutation.
MTHFR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's a genetic defect. I mean, I know that Western medicine likes to, or
That's what they call it, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
because
It's yeah.
I think it's like a marker of some sort that if you activate that marker, it shows up, you know.
Yeah, and so this says it's having 2 copies of the MTHFR gene mutation may raise your risk for certain health conditions. And so what I learned about this, and this article may or may not agree with what I'm going to say. Frankly, I don't care what the article says, but what I believe is that the MTHFR, this mutation that they're talking about, can make it harder for your body to detoxify. Because yeah, I think I alluded to before, when you put so much crap in your body, and we are getting crap in the water, in the air, in our food, all of these toxins that we're constantly ingesting, your immune system can get rid of them, right? But if you have this MTHFR genetic mutation, it significantly reduces your body's ability to detox crap from your system. So I have this, I was positive for this. And so it might be helpful. I would recommend, especially if you're having an autoimmune issue, I would recommend getting tested. There's a blood test they can do to see if you have this. And that'll just help you, that'll help inform, how well can your body detox on its own. If you find that you do have this, then, that's going to change your approach to detoxifying through other means.
Mm.
My doctor's gonna love me on his next visit.
Oh yeah, it's hard to have these conversations with doctors sometimes. I give you strength, to assert yourself, because they have lots of ego.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
They do. And they have a lot of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And, until like 5 years ago or so, I haven't gone to I heard recently that it was about 5 or 6 years ago that medical schools started for the first time teaching nutrition. So let me say that. Let me say that one more time. Yeah. 5 years ago, medical schools started teaching nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And so doctors just have no idea.
It's probably it's a warped type of nutrition too, there is a model that people, follow, but I don't know how accurate in this day and age, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of hard for people to catch up with some of the new things that people are finding out,
Right.
Yeah. Even with all this, all our internet, and sometimes information actually is hard to find.
Yeah. There's just so much that's unknown. And there's so much that there is not an incentive to research, right? Because if it's not going to result in a drug or a patent, or if it's not going to result in if it's not going to result in something that they can make money off of, there's no incentive to research it, right? So for example, there's no incentive to research the association between Epstein-Barr virus and autoimmune disease, right? Primarily because they can't come up with a pill to get rid of Epstein-Barr virus. They've tried, they failed. So the Western medicine, framework believes you can't cure EBV. And so there's no incentive to figure out if EBV is connected to anything else, because you can't do anything about it anyway. So they're not going to put any money into researching it. But, ironically, I told you, so when I checked into the hospital and I'm like 135 pounds and I can't speak, and I'm having to write to my wife on a notepad because I can't talk and I can't eat. And my wife is frustrated and she's telling the doctors, EBV, and they're blowing her off. And then literally, I think like it was 2 or 3 years later, there was an article in some obscure medical journal that said, oh, by the way, we think there's a connection between EBV and autoimmune conditions. And I'm like, but, it was like it wasn't the mainstream type of a medical journal. So it's just, there are so many things there are so many ways for us to get better from illness that we don't know about because they haven't been researched, because there's not an incentive to do so. So there's that.
I mean, everybody seems to get a lot of money from just being sick. I'll tell you this, like when I went to my endocrinologist and I said, hey, I need help, she was like, you're not sick enough. and she basically told me I couldn't get any medication or surgery, which is not what I wanted anyway. And she said, just keep doing what you're doing. That's her literal word. Just keep doing what you're doing because you seem okay. And I was like, obviously, I'm here for a reason. I'm not okay. I know what I looked like and felt like before I came here. And I said, obviously, I'm not going to get the help I need from this doctor. So I had to go other places, and they kind of directed me in the nutrition department on what I could do for myself. And she's kind of there. I saw the endocrinologist as like, okay, I've gone to this point where I actually can see my sickness, so I can measure it from that person, but not heal. She's not my healing doctor. Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to throw in about this is for you, Sujata, about on the topic of gluten. I'm wondering if because I think you said that you didn't have a problem with gluten prior to coming to the US. Did I understand that right? Or you didn't notice it, or you didn't do anything about it until you came to the US? Is that right?
No, I didn't mention about that. It was about the cinnamon. So cinnamon was where I was tested allergic to.
Gotcha. Okay.
When I did the food allergy test for, like, they just take your blood and they test for some 18,000 categories. And so one of them was dust and one of them was cinnamon, and there were three, four more wherein the parameter was really, really high.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, the reason I brought that up against that, I thought I misunderstood you, but what I was going to say is that you should know that gluten in the United States is very different from gluten in other countries, especially in Europe, because they have the degree to which they genetically modified the wheat in the US very different from other countries. And so that's why some people who have celiac disease, which is the sensitivity to gluten, some people can go to Italy and eat Italian pasta, or go to France and have croissants and have no symptoms, because the gluten is much more closer to the natural state in those countries than it is in the US. So just another reason if you're in the US, another reason to avoid gluten. What was that, Carl?
I said non-modified GMOs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the difference the moment I eat gluten, like really, really fast, So I've eliminated it from my diet completely, in addition to dairy and eggs. And I wanted to also encourage you, because what I've learned also is that what I'm thinking, right, is that we need our entire system to work efficiently. And so when I avoid fat, and fats could be in the form of any oil, good or bad, like coconut or avocado, I have to avoid. Yeah. Anywhere that oils could be hidden, like in nuts, I only eat very tiny amounts of it. And even in animal proteins, unfortunately. So I don't eat any because animal proteins are laced with fats. You can see it. And what it does, it just slows me down, slows down my liver, slows down my processing. So I noticed that every time I do that, then my healing wasn't very good. In fact, my immune system went worse. So I would probably, if you are struggling, maybe if people had really good, healthy, clean livers, very efficient livers, then maybe they wouldn't have this problem. But for me, I could feel the difference. And maybe in other people like you might also struggle. So people who are struggling might want to avoid it as much as possible until it gets healed. Yeah.
Just to add on to what Donna said about nuts and oil, coconut oil for me, in my experience, what I've seen is if I have it in raw form, it suits me. In cooked form, it doesn't suit me. Okay, so it kind of helps with reducing the inflammation if I, consume a teaspoon of coconut oil, maybe every day, first thing in the morning. That does help. But in the cooked form, it kind of creates some kind of indigestion. And about nuts, over the years, I've tried many things, and finally what seems to be working is soaking the nuts overnight
Yes.
and draining the water, peeling off the
Yeah.
skin, and then you have it, wash it
Yeah.
really well, and then consume it. So that makes a lot of
Yeah.
difference.
I do that. I do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe what that could be is they're harder to digest. Yeah, so
Yeah.
those things get a little bit
Mm.
more broken down, but it still doesn't resolve the fatty parts of it. That
Right.
if you still consume it, you are still allowing that fat into your system, and your liver has to just deal with it. So I would say if you love nuts, just maybe small amounts. Yeah, not terribly often, and definitely not any bad oils.
Right.
Yeah.
That is going to really
Yeah.
hurt. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, sure.
So I'd like to, oh, go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to say something about the Epstein-Barr virus. Actually, if you happen to come to Munich again, what is it now? What is the number they measured? So is it completely healed, or how is it? Is it still in your body? And
Yeah, so the last time I checked it, so it's actually been several years since I checked it. I checked it after I was stabilized. So this was probably 6 to 8 months after I got out of the hospital. The blisters had almost completely gone, and the inflammation was under control. I checked the EBV again, and it was significantly lower. It was almost zero. Since then, I have not checked it again, so I don't know. But I also haven't had a whole lot of symptoms. But the correlation, and again, let me be clear, I don't want to say this is causation. I believe it's causation, but I can't prove that. All I can prove is correlation, right? So when I was having symptoms, and as my symptoms were getting worse, the EBV numbers were going extremely high, really, really high. And then when my symptoms were stabilized, the EBV was at a negligible level. So again, all I have is the correlation, right? But I don't know from what, I don't know what else would have, I don't see how they're not related. I'm sorry, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Well, I just wanted to say a few years ago, I did have Epstein-Barr. And I went to it's called a heilpraktiker in Germany, so I wouldn't know the English meaning or American meaning. So it's basically not it's basically working with bioresonance, if this tells you anything.
Okay, I think so. Yeah. So yeah,
Yes.
not traditional medicine, in other words, Western or not Western.
Yes, exactly. So, and I did go there, and I did have this, and it completely healed it out. So maybe you want to, if you said you're in Dallas, Texas, maybe you can look into it. I can give you further information. And especially, there is many things this bioresonance can actually heal. So, for example, when my son was born, every time he had something, we would go there, and it doesn't do any harm. It's just giving the information to your body to heal yourself. But you have to also have supplements. And I was doing some heavy every year before the COVID was, I was doing every year this colon hydrotherapy, because I did have some issues with my thyroids, and I did also take cortisone.
Yeah.
So I did want to clean everything, and when COVID came, things were happening. Anyway, I did get sick, so I did do some heavy fasting and some intermediate fasting, and I had some issues because I think it was all also correlated with stress, with a lot of stress in the family, and with the fasting, I managed to get many things done, because there was a correlation. So someone of you mentioned, if you had, we have these toxins, so you cannot do it with 1 month or 2 months. I just realized I did just like 3 weeks ago, I did 55 hours and of fasting, and then I did like 1.5 days pause, and then I did 25 hours, and I just see there is a correlation also with dairy products, with sugars, and of course stress, and what was the other thing? What was the other thing? Oh, gluten.
Gluten,
Yes. So especially, but especially also with dairy products, and it is terrible. So these drinks. But for example, when you do 55 hours fasting, some of the people I'm doing this biohacking, and they also, some of them do 72 hours or 60 hours, or they say for women it's not recommended. It's like 36 to 48 hours. I can say a lot of things can also be eliminated by this fasting. Men can do more than women. Some people say women shouldn't do this, and this is really, really extremely helpful. But they also say, because if you want, there is this biohacker group. They also have been at the A-Fest right now. And some of these people have met Dave Asprey and this other man in the airplane, and they do recommend to do this through age test, which can also be pretty helpful if you want to improve your health. And oh yes, and because in this biohacker group, they also they are gathered. We are gathered. There is very interesting information also going on. And for example, they say if you go on this many hours of fasting, and your cells can be also rebuilt, it's very important what you eat after that. And they do recommend avocado as a good fat, and some other foods. So if you like, I can send you this link to enter this group. Maybe this will give you some information which can also improve. I mean, you say you have it all improved, but maybe there's other things which can be helpful to you.
Yeah, please. Actually, if you could share it in the WhatsApp group. Are you in the WhatsApp group for? We created a WhatsApp group for CLC.
Well, what I can do is, this is German guy who shared the link. I can ask him if he can put you in the group, because there is this guy who just was at the A-Fest, and they have this one guy is going to do the true age test, and I'm also think I'm gonna do it. It is pretty helpful, so I will ask him to add you to the group. And yes, there's a lot of information. Of course, there's people fasting like this 60, 72 hours and whatever, but there's a lot of other information which is maybe beneficial for you.
Yeah, I'm putting my my WhatsApp number in the chat. Yes.
I'm just making a screenshot. I will ask him to add you to the group, and it's really very interesting, and because they are all people from Mind Valley. So because he's been like 17 years at Mind Valley, so there's a lot of people, and it's really beautiful because, like I said, just recently they've done this fasting, and they do explain, because there's so many experts there, they do also explain what's happening in the body. Then there are people who know about how women should fast. And I've been having some thyroid issues as well. So it's really amazingly helpful. And
Yeah,
I don't know if you drink coffee.
I do.
That is something also, yeah, with the caffeine, there is also issues.
Yeah,
Then they have this bulletproof coffee. I don't know
yeah,
if you've heard.
yeah. I know Dave. That's Dave
So,
Asprey's thing, right?
so
Yeah.
I've tried that recently, and this is so unbelievably good. But I just drink like once a week the coffee, and then the other days not. But I do use this oil as unbelievably. I can only say it's so amazing. So there is so much information. If you join this group, I cannot even say it all. Is unbelievable. And maybe if you want to see in Dallas this bioresonance, because they're in Munich, if you ever come, there is this man who does, people travel from many places,
To see
sometimes
him.
for
Yeah.
2 weeks, because he does help people in many ways with cancer and everything. So, and oh yeah, I wanted to say, and then there is this thing, there is those supplements we want to also look into, because if our body lacks of something, but that's why I think they do recommend this true age test, because yes. So I will send him your number, so his name, yeah, I will tell you, and then you will profit from this.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And you know, there's so much to learn. There's so much information out there, and I've been studying this stuff, you know, since I got sick. I've been very interested in alternative medicine and biohacking and all those other things. And there is no, as much as I know, I only know a little bit. You know, every day new, I hear something or read something new that I didn't know before. And it's really cool because there's really no reason for us to be sick. You know, and I think that what has happened is a lot of people start feeling bad and then get used to feeling bad. And so I think we forget what it's like to feel good, you know, because remember when you were a kid and when you were young and you would get up out of bed in the morning, you didn't feel tired and you didn't feel crappy and you didn't have muscle aches and you didn't have headaches and sinuses and all this other shit and rashes and blah, blah, blah. And then that didn't happen. But as we get older, you know, as I said, I believe it's mainly stress and toxins. All this stuff accumulates in our body. We start to get sick. But then the key is that we forget what it's like to feel good. And our brain tricks us into believing that this is the normal way to feel. And so when that becomes normal for us, we stop seeking out ways to feel better, right? We stop trying to be healthy. We stop being mindful of our diet. We lose incentive to do exercise, and we just ignore all of this huge wealth of information that there is out there, that if we can just tap into it, we can go back to the state that our body's supposed to be in. So I just like to encourage people, just because you feel crappy doesn't mean that has to be that way. Right.
Yeah. And then I also want to add to, I mean, keep in mind, like, the things that I recommend are things that I encountered and resonated with me. It might not necessarily work for everybody, maybe, like, because maybe you have a set of certain circumstances, like say there's like how you were talking about, like maybe there's a extra sensitivity or extra irritation that could have developed, and maybe introducing a new thing, like say like somebody who has very heavy acid reflux, all right, and then introducing lemon water into their system, and they just ate, and they just, and then they drank a whole big jug of lemon water, they're going to get serious heartburn, if they were to do that. So I just wanted to say, like, keep in mind certain things that you might want to introduce in your system, and some of the reactions, like maybe you might have to ask questions to see if it's true. Is this really true that what I'm having this reaction, is it a bad life, like adjustment type of reaction. Like, is it really an allergy, or is it my body detoxing or something like that? And you might have to ask your body what it is, you know. And I do have like, when I think about intermittent fasting and the types of fasting that people have done, I do have mixed feelings about that. Because, and I just want to share this, you know, just to have a discussion. Because when I think about, because when I'm really sick, I remember me being really extremely like fatigued. And I did try intermittent fasting. It really, really brought me so low. Like, I don't know, like maybe why, maybe because my adrenals were shot, or maybe like I wasn't getting the nutrients anyway to heal. And then on top of that, I'm withholding more nutrients in my system through the intermittent fasting. I can see how people can heal when they do intermittent fasting, because they're doing what they're doing is they're starving the viruses from the ingredients that probably was feeding them, you know, like the gluten, the dairy, the eggs, those are being eliminated in an intermittent fasting type of environment. But I wonder if like the same effect could be done, the elimination of all of these different food groups could be done gently, you know, for people who need, like me, who needed a gentle type of healing, you know. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I found the most healing I got was always giving my body nutrients. And I also noticed that when I gave my body some rest from because, you know, in American diet, we throw everything together, you know, rice, beans, whatever, chicken, butter, whatever, like a whole bunch of like 100 ingredients, and some of it, half of it's not good. But when I gave my body like I fed my body like food, like just like clean food that had never been like produced, that had never been processed, yeah, and just maybe stuck to just a few ingredients, I never starved, but I ate all day, like every 2 hours and stuff like that. And I felt like my system rested and was able to expel, you know, a lot of stuff that it was sitting in, you know, for such a long time, finally, you know. So I would encourage you guys to kind of maybe think about a couple of these things, just in case it could resonate with you. Yeah.
My recipes have a max of 90 ingredients.
90.
No more than 90.
That's a good start. It's a great start right there.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a really good point. One of the things I've learned and that I believe is that you know, the digestive system and the function of digestion is something that's, I think, overlooked, not given a lot of attention. And it's really the single most important, probably the single most important aspect of health is your digestion, right? Because it's the way that your body absorbs nutrition from food, and it's also the way that your body separates the toxic stuff from the useful stuff, right? So when you eat something, you ingest something, your body's digestion eliminates all of the toxic waste, sends it to your lymphatic system processes out of the body. So when digestion is not working well, or it's overtaxed, it's going to consume a lot of the body's energy. And when it consumes a lot of the body's energy, the body doesn't have energy to do other things. And so shit starts over the long term. You get sick, things stop to work. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there, that we tend to underappreciate digestion and what happens when you're in a constant state of stress. So the stress response, I don't know if you guys know this, how the stress response works, but when we're in stress, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol and adrenaline are intended to turn on certain parts of your body so that you can run from the tiger. And it turns off other parts of your body to reserve the energy to send to the parts of your body that are needed to run from the tiger, because that's what the stress response was initially for, you know, as recently as 1,000 years ago, right? Because we were running from tigers for survival. So when you're being chased by a tiger, the stress response is sending blood to the muscles, because you need muscles to run. It's sending you know, energy and blood to like the eyes and all the different things that you need to avoid getting eaten by the tiger. And then when you run up the tree and the tiger loses interest in you, your body calms back down, and everything goes back to normal. But one of the systems that have energy taken away when you're being chased by the tiger is your digestion. So what happens is we're constantly under stress because we always have a boss yelling at us, because we're always in traffic, because we're always running late, because we have emails and social media and blah, 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 blah. We're always stressed. So your digestion is always depleted of the full amount of the body's energy that it needs to do the digestion and the lymphatics and all that other stuff. So you're taking the most important thing and you're depleting it of the energy it needs. So that's something to think about. That's the stress. That's why stress management is so important.
Yeah, it's like, I would like to add one more thing over there. It's like, you have to give enough time and enough rest to your body to recover and heal as well. So
Yeah.
for me, that has worked tremendously. Like, if I'm on a constant go and I'm just not giving or I'm like, pushing myself and working too hard, I have to give my body a complete rest. And that helps me to heal faster.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
May I add, is there time to add one more thing?
Sure.
Yes, okay. So I would love to talk about some of the mental aspects that I had to go through, because I believe if I went through my whole journey of healing and sickness, my dad had passed away. I was in 2 car accidents. I have 4 children. So like all of these were kind of compounding things, so I had a lot to deal with. And I think once I had to kind of sit down with myself and kind of talk on some spiritual soul, all of these things that are on an energetic level. So we talked a lot about all of the, nutrition and physical parts. And I know there was meditation and the stress part, but then at the same time, like I found some really great peace when I set intentions for myself to heal. So like, say, for example, I wanted to, if I'm in Hawaii, I'm just picking it because that's where I feel the most healing from. I'm in Hawaii, I'm in the beach, and I'm listening to the waves, and I'm asking the waves, please pull out some of the, sadness, or pull out some of the grieving, pull out some of, and just wash away, stuff like that. You can do that. It's very simply, even in the shower. You could be like, I feel something in my, how when France says there's something in your body and give it a color, like that, like have that intent, like, hey, there's this black part of my shoulder that kind of like feels heaviness. I feel like there's sickness that settled there. Wash away some of that off of my body. You can do that very simply. Even looking at, yes, I know I will give you food. Even looking at the moon, okay? Like looking at the moon, I set this intention all the time. I know, say hi to everybody. Yes.
Hello, cutie.
I will get you some food. Give me like a minute. And then so you can with the moon, you can just kind of like meditate with the moon and ask that moon, like, hey, that gravitational pull some of this, bad feelings that I had with my cousin 10 years ago. Yes, something like that, like if you're constantly always trying to, yeah, go ahead. Okay, I will find it for you. I will. But you know what I'm saying? If you're constantly doing that for yourself and have that as a habit, how much easier is it to heal? Yeah. Anyway, that's it.
Well, thank you. So last thing is I wanted to offer you guys a gift. I'm going to put in my chat my company website. I'll show you the website. So I mentioned the brainwave entrainment and how much it helped me. So we, my wife and I have a company. We actually sell these soundtracks. If you go to the website and you hit click how it works, this will explain how the technology works to achieve the different brain states. These are the different brain states. So feel free to take a look at it. You guys are welcome to have anything you want off of here for free. I'm going to give you a code. So you just go to store. There are different soundtracks here. It'll work for anything except for this one here, the self method. This is a online course, but all the soundtracks, you're welcome to get whatever you want for free, just because. And it is it's helpful. So what happens when you order one? They're for different purposes. So we have one that's a power nap. There's for sleep, for calmness, for creativity, so on, for focus, emotional freedom. I'm happy to, if you want to talk about it on a separate call, I'm happy to tell you about it. But just check it out. When you order one, it'll come with a PDF, and you can download the PDF. I recommend you read the PDF because it gives you instructions for how to use it effectively, because it's not just a matter of just playing the soundtrack. You have to use headphones. We recommend that you hydrate well before you listen, set an intention, all these different things. So that's the website. And if you use the code EverCoach, all one word, you can get your order for free. So happy to have you guys do that.
Headphones are recommended.
Yeah, it doesn't work without headphones. Yes, you have to use headphones.
Oh.
And yeah, I can explain why. So the brain frequencies are generally lower than what the human ear can hear.
Yeah.
So for example, the sleep state, well, when you go into a healthy sleep state, your brain should be operating at a speed of anywhere from 0.5 up to about 3 hertz or cycles per second. That's the slowest brainwave frequency. But that is so low that the human ear can't hear it. So I can't create that frequency in a form of sound that would cause your brain to follow it. So what we do instead is we create what's called a binaural beat. And what that means is I'm giving you 2 different frequencies, one in each ear. The difference between them being the frequency that I want your brain to go to. So for example, I might give you 100 hertz, which the ear can hear in the left ear, and that would give you 103 hertz in the right ear. And the brain isn't used to hearing 2 different frequencies at the same time. So what the brain does is it reconciles itself on the difference between those 2 frequencies. So the brain will hear 3 hertz, and it will program itself to 3 hertz, which is the sleep state. So that's why you have to have headphones, because without the headphones, you won't be able to get the 2 different frequencies. And there's no other way to get a frequency that low. So that's why it doesn't work without the headphones.
Okay.
Yeah. So feel free to help yourself, and I hope it's helpful.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much, Dale.
Thanks,
Thanks
Dale.
so much, Dale. Thanks a
You're
lot.
For
welcome.
this whole, even for this whole group call,
Yeah.
organizing.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was happy to do it, and we'll do it again. I don't know. I still haven't heard from Sanjay what his availability is, but we'll try to do it again, and Sanjay will tell you about his story.
I'll beat him up.
Oh,
I'll get a date from him.
Yeah, do it. Do
Yeah,
it.
I have a long list,
by the
of
way, by the way, I just remembered something. I don't know. You mentioned you had some hidden bacteria or something earlier on, right?
Yeah.
I did have the same. I don't know if it was the same bacteria, but it was something hidden. It was a hidden bacteria in the body, and it did cause me to have some really, really terrible pain in my knee. And I went to a lot of things, and originally they said to me I need to have an operation, but it took me half a year to I didn't want to go for an operation. I was having a total fear of that, and it happened to me after I had last year I had COVID, and I had really terrible COVID. And after the COVID disappeared, I had this knee problems, and I went. Yes. Anyway, to cut it short, after a long time, they discovered it is a bacteria which is hidden in the body, and what it took is I had to take antibiotics for a few weeks, and the whole thing did go away. But it was really so hard to discover, because this knee issue was the cause of it was this bacteria, which is hidden in the body.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned this earlier on, it just reminded me, it was really unbelievable, because several doctors wouldn't be able to find it. So yes, that was Western healing. I just wanted to say, sometimes it's also good to have a mix of things, and I was really happy to have these antibiotics. But nevertheless, because of the antibiotics, it's also important to build up the bacteria in the guts again, I think it's called in English. Yes, so I just wanted to add this. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. Yeah, it was actually it was the Epstein-Barr virus that was hiding out in my body. And then also there was the Candida fungus, which is what they found when they did that blood test. But I think all three, bacteria, viruses, and funguses, all have the ability to hide out within the body, and therefore they get missed in a blood test, right? So unless you're actually injecting a needle into an organ or a tissue and extracting that and then testing, you wouldn't be able to find that virus or that bacteria or that fungus, because it's not in the blood, right? So typically they do the blood test. They're like, oh, we checked your blood. You don't have that thing. Well, I don't know, because just because it's not found in the blood doesn't mean it's not somewhere else in my body.
But anyway, I want to thank you so much for this group and for sharing your story. Is really, I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for your gift. This is so generous. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening, and let's stay in touch, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Dale.
All together.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dale.
everybody.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.